Hello, hello. It is Clare Crew here, and yes, you are listening to another episode of the Thriving Children podcast. But today I wanted to sneak on before the official episode just to give you a heads up that there's been a few challenges with the audio on this episode. And I've spent a lot of time editing behind the scenes. It's now at a level where I think it's reasonably comfortable to listen to. That the worst bit is at the start. Gerda is fairly quiet, my guest on the podcast, and I had some insanely loud rain at the time of recording as well. So please persist, because there is so much gold in this episode where I'm talking to Gerda Foster all about play deprivation. And I really feel that the end of the episode more than makes up for the bumpy beginning. So enjoy.
Welcome to the Thriving Children podcast, the show that helps parents and teachers to put the magic back in child development. Here's your host, Clare Crew.
This is episode number 71 of the Thriving Children podcast. I'm Clare Crew, and in this episode I'm chatting to Gerda Foster about play deprivation. Welcome to the show, Gerda.
Lovely to be here, Clare.
So we met at this year's National Play and Play Work Conference, and you have an incredibly unique background, which I would love for you to share a bit about.
I'm a criminologist, and I've worked in the prison system for over 30 years.
You're really passionate about play, and you're coming from that background in the way that you approach play. And so I would love to hear about what free undirected play offers in childhood.
Well, free undirected play is what's been missing, and that's why I came on board with this passion of mine, is that there was a lot of research done by a professor, psychiatrist Stuart Brown, who interviewed a lot of violent offenders, 600 in fact, in Texas prisons. And he came to a shocking realisation that almost all these offenders, most of the murderers, had play-deprived childhoods. Now that rang a bell with me because of the work I do, and I've worked with, as I said, psychopaths and so forth, and it's made a lot of difference to. It's confirmed what I've always believed, that play-deprived childhoods, traumatic childhoods, can create antisocial behaviour, which then ends up in and I love this saying, hurt people. Because when children are play deprived, they don't have those skills that a normal play environment, and especially free play, gives, which is creativity, social connections, feeling of, and one of the biggest things is that children learn when they play together, they need to learn self-control. And that is something that's definitely missing in people that act out in a criminological way.
That's huge. And so really you've seen the dark side of what happens when children don't get play. And so that makes sense as to why you are a fierce play advocate, because it's not just a matter of missing out on fun. It's so much more, isn't it?
Yes, it is so much more. It's really, and of course I'm really getting quite concerned that actually the act of self-directed play is becoming more and more rare as parents become more mindful of safety with their children, and not allowing that to, like with my generation, I often commiserate with people over 50 or so who say, yeah, look, we used to go outside, and when the street lights came on, that's when we came home, because that was dinner time. So everybody just went out and played together. There was no television or devices in those days, and they just played together, and nobody supervised them, and they just came home when the streetlights came on.
And that's very much how my early childhood was as well. Growing up in a part of the world where everyone kind of knew everyone and that freedom was there. And that is where all of my best play memories come from. And yet today there's this sense that the world is now unsafe. And so we can't, a lot of parents my age will say, oh, I used to roam when I was a kid, but I can't let my children do that now because the world isn't a safe place. But in actual fact, I recently read Free Range Kids by Lenore Skenazy, and statistically there are no more abductions and things like that happening in the world now than there was in the 70s, 80s, 90s. But what's changed is that we've got a lot of fear in the TV we watch, whether it's the actual news or whether it's in all of these crime kind of detective shows. And it's really hard for our brain to distinguish between what's real and what isn't. And so what ends up happening is we actually, we get this sense that the minute our child is away from our reach, something is going to happen to them.
Exactly, and you're quite right that in my own research too, that actually there are no more abductions than there used to be. And that's one reason why, and people may say, well, you put your head in the sand, but for almost a year now, I don't access the normal media. Like newspapers, television news, because it really isn't very helpful. People are so fearful now, and the children pick that up too. And we've got to get back to when we're at the conference, we heard about all these playgrounds with loose bits where kids were given hammers and saws and it's like a junkyard where kids can there's very little supervision and play, creatively. It's just, we have to go back to that.
And so, a lot of the individuals that you work with, as we've said, have missed out on that in their childhood, in their youth. And so is there a role for play in that path of rehabilitation?
Absolutely. Even though the horse is bolted from the barn, I've still found experiences that I've had with offenders when they've actually learnt that it's okay to play. For instance, I'm also a laughter facilitator, and when I used to run laughter sessions in my group sessions to get in fact, I ran one about 3 weeks ago in Goulburn in the jail. But yes, it was interesting that this one girl, she was in the late 30s, but what she did was get her parole officer about 8 years later to find me, because she wanted to express to me how important it was that she learnt for the first time in living memory to laugh in those laughter sessions. And she said that changed her life. And here she was, a chronic drug user, and she had broken the cycle, and learning to laugh and being playful, which is what laughter is about, changed her life.
That's amazing. And I know that it had a similar impact at the play conference, because as what always seems to happen with the schedule, the people that I want to hear the most, I can't, because that's when I'm speaking. But there was just this roar of noise from your room towards the end of your presentation, because you were getting everyone laughing. And, it is... the topic that you're talking about is quite heavy, but then I think to be able to, lighten the mood and have that laughter, and I think even just for any adult, we tend not to be playful and we tend not to laugh as much as we did when we were children. So there's a bit of a sadness there. So I love that you're out there and using laughter as a tool to really help people feel good about themselves again.
Yes, it's. I did one with a group of islanders the other day, and there was one of the guys when we were running this laughter session, which only went for about 10 minutes. One of them laughed so much that he had to crawl under a table to get away because he was in so much pain from laughing so much. So it was just wonderful.
And do you find that people are receptive to you advocating play and laughter in working with people who are in prison, or do you feel like there's a bit of skepticism? I almost feel like, for people that have committed a crime and who have been put away, they almost they do get treated a bit like that child that kind of gets shunned for misbehaviour at school. And so it's almost seen that warmer approach isn't really the way that they should be treated, when in actual fact, I think that they're the people that need that love and consideration more than anyone else.
Yes, you are certainly right there. And that's why I wrote a book called You Are Lovable, trying to explain what happens when children feel like outcasts because of their background and their play-deprived connection with people. Like, I interviewed an offender to join the violent offenders program, and I asked him a little bit about his background as we were filling out this 4-page form, and I said what it was like. He said, look, when I was a kid, he said, I hated people. He said, I used to always get away on my own, and that's how I coped with life, to be alone. And it's that isolation that's even happening today because children are on their devices all the time. And that's another passion I have, is that children who are on devices are also being isolated and not doing physical, connecting, social play as much as they could.
And so is one of your concerns, Gerda, that there's that isolation and then that unhealthy relationship with others begins at a young age?
Yes, it does, because people, like my children grew up when there was television, thankfully not many computers around, so we didn't have television at home. Our children grew up without television, and we grew up without a phone, and we didn't have any money, so they had no toys either. But they're all very creative now in their adulthood. It's real to me, because 80% of the people I work with in prison have drug or alcohol related issues, that their offending is linked to drug or substance abuse or alcohol abuse. Now, as I said in my speech at the conference, that when children learn that when they are angry, when they are sick, when they are stressed, or even when they're being rewarded for being good or it's their birthday, they are learning through their mental pathways in the brain that things outside of themselves make them feel better. Now, that is really scary, that they're learning that they don't, as we all know, those of us who work in the field, that happiness is an inside job, and that children are learning that devices can be a reward or a comfort when they're emotionally unwell or very well. And that is, it's creating, they're even saying it now, and the brains that have been fired, the centres, the synapses, are actually similar to cocaine, that kids are becoming really plugged into devices. It's really quite urgent that people take those iPads away.
Yeah, so it's almost setting up that addictive mentality at a really young age. And it's not just children. I mean, obviously, I think children are more vulnerable because of, the fact that their brain and body are still developing. But, that what you just said too, Gerda, really rings true for adults as well, because, there's a lot of addiction to, that iPhone in our pocket and to Facebook and to whatever app we've got flashing these red notifications at us. And it is something, I know within myself, I am more likely to check in online on days where I'm not feeling so good in my skin or something's going wrong, and days that I'm quite peaceful and calm, I'm quite happy not looking at anything online. So it's really interesting to notice that within myself on a small scale, and then realize what that means for our children who are having very free and ready access to those technologies.
And not only that, but children until the age of about 7 have got a different part of their brain operating, which means that they absorb more. They haven't got that sense of being able to discriminate the way that we grow up when we're older. We can discriminate. And so that they're in a trance-like state where they accept whatever comes in. And it's so one of my favourite sayings is, children are like blank sheets of paper on which others write messages. So that by the time a child is about 7, that is filled up. And as you probably realise with your beautiful work, I had a lovely look at your website, that how many murders and violent acts do children observe by the time they're 12 or 15? Tens of thousands. It's and I mean, I think any medium, like a knife, you can use a knife to cut bread or to cut somebody into pieces, but I think the media is here, but can we use it in a judicious way?
Yeah, super interesting. Now, as a bit of a side note, I had no idea that you had a book, Gerda. Is there anything else that you can share about the book and what it's all about?
Well, I'm just rewriting it, actually. I wrote it a long time ago. But it's about bullying, and it's about that when we're born, and I mean, I've talked to street kids when I've talked about when you're born, people love you. And one kid said to me, well, I was found in a box at the dump, so how can I feel lovable? So, and people come into this world from all different ways and means. However, that child, once he would have been picked up and taken to the hospital, would have received boundless love from people who found him and care of him after that. But he still ended up being a street kid and homeless and all that. But yeah, generally we get the message when we're born that we're lovable because we hear people loving us and cuddling us. And then when we start to crawl around and explore things, all of a sudden we get yelled at. Stop, don't! Because the people who love us are trying to keep us safe from burning ourselves or falling downstairs or something. So slowly we lose that love, or that feeling that we're lovable, because we keep getting criticised when we may be in danger. But as a kid, we don't get that. We don't get that people love us, are trying to keep us safe. All we know is they're shouting at us and they don't love us. And that's just the kids' way. And so we grow up with those messages, and our lovability goes down as a result of that. And then those that have very traumatic childhoods end up being the bullies at school, because they feel so unlovable and so unable to ask for friendship and wonder why people don't like them, because they're always surly and out of sync with everybody else, because they haven't had that play socialisation. They become the bullies. And my book is about being compassionate with those kids that feel unlovable and sending them love and trying to understand why they are the way they are in a little meditation that I do in the book, to get them to feel that the children need to be more mindful that these people are hurting and they need love and support, not punishment. As the same with prisoners and the jail population and substance abuse. Putting people in jail because they are drug addicts or alcoholics does not solve the problem. Compassion and support is what we need to give people because most people use drugs and alcohol because they're in pain. They're in pain.
Oh, so many amazing points there. And I can hear my voice echoing, which is incredibly distracting. But yeah, I think firstly that's going to be an amazing resource once that is complete and published. So make sure you let me know, and I'll keep listeners up to date with that. But also, such an important point about, we might be doing all the right things, but the way that we change our interactions with our children as they get older does perhaps dilute that feeling of love that they have. And also I think it really almost dilutes that sense that we trust them, and also then when they don't have our trust, they don't then trust themselves, and that's when they can kind of go down a rabbit hole of feeling pretty rubbish or maybe doing risk-taking at an age or in areas that perhaps are not ideal.
Well, this is my magic formula, because I've had 5 children, and yesterday my 11th grandchild arrived.
Ooh, congratulations.
To me, the magic formula is appreciation and gratitude. That when you focus on what your child does well rather than what they've done wrong, that grows. That grows. That I found that if I focused on their messy rooms and all that sort of thing, that there was it doesn't work. But when they do something, the smallest thing that is enhancing their self-worth by actually picking something up and putting it away or whatever, without being dramatic, just being authentic, just say, that was really great, you did that, but that's all. No big, let's have a party because you actually picked up after yourself, but a natural, relaxed appreciation. To me, that is the magic formula.
And what's interesting about that too, Gerda, is that I actually think, like, having met you, you being someone that's so full of compassion, it actually makes you like a magnet to other people. Like I plonk myself down next to you at that pre-speakers dinnery thing. And I wasn't meant to be talking because I was meant to be saving my voice that I had lost the day before. And I couldn't help myself because there was just this sense of ease and comfort that I don't have automatically with a lot of people. And so I think that while your intention behind it is about how you help other people to see themselves in the best light, it actually also then changes the experiences that come your way as well.
I've got a dear friend who's going through cancer treatment at the moment, and Bernie DeKoven, as you have one of his TED Talks on your site, and I was talking to him on Skype yesterday, and he was saying it's amazing, like he goes to hospital to get chemo and so forth, and he said, it's amazing how quickly the nursing staff changed their attitude towards me, because he's the guru of play, and he laughs with them, he plays with them, he's silly and all that sort of thing. He said straight away they've changed their attitude towards me, and I just have a wonderful time when I go to hospital.
Part of that might be because there's almost there's this seriousness that comes into someone's interactions with you if you have a terminal illness or if you're in the setting of a jail. Like, it really does filter through to those interactions. And I guess what he's doing, and also what you're doing in your work, Gerda, is that you're not ignoring that setting is there, but you're making it one of the less important factors of that interaction, as opposed to everyone else that kind of has that overshadowing everything that comes thereafter.
Well, the thing is that it is a very oppressive and violent setting that I work in a maximum security men's prison. I have worked with women too for 15 years, and they were much more open to being playful than the men, absolutely. But I walk into that very sombre setting, and there could have been a riot the day before, or in fact we've had a couple of suicides over the last few weeks. But I walk in there, and I'm a really loud dresser, and that's part of my whole thing is just to be out there and be colourful. But it's you make of it what you can, and because I walk in such a positive attitude, I've actually been reported for being on drugs, and I had to be drug tested because they can't imagine somebody walking into a jail and going through the metal detector and saying, "Ta-da! Another day in paradise." And even now, a year later, my colleagues say, "My God, are you sure you're not on drugs?" But I'm just high on life. I love it. I love it. My greatest vice at the moment is just a few cups of coffee, but I've given up drinking, and I just feel fantastic.
What do you do to look after yourself, to help you be in that state of happiness and not feel bogged down by the work that you're doing? Because, probably almost no one listening in is going to be like you working in a prison environment, but there's a lot of people who might have a class this year that's really bogging them down, or they've got children with high needs at home or behaviour issues, and it's really easy to feel like the world is swallowing you up, and yet you're doing this work and you're being drug tested because you're so happy. What's your secret?
Well, it's gratitude. I feel grateful for everything. Like when I'm driving on the freeway to work, it takes me 65 k's to work each way every day. But I say hello to the trees. I thank the road. I look at the sky. Gratitude is such a beautiful thing to put petrol in your tank. It really is. It just lightens your load. And then you start to look at things, when you look at things differently, things change. They haven't changed, but you've changed. I did a lot of child rearing without any electronic help, no television. And that was hard when I knew. And I used to sometimes say to my husband, "All those bitches with their electronic babysitters, and here I am, I'm getting no help at all." But we learned to play with saucepans, and my husband would write a play for the kids, and they'd perform it for the neighbours over Christmas. Because we'd swell to 8 children during the holidays. So that's how I started working in groups, because I had 8 kids. And we had to find something to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Do you know what I'm realising hearing you say that I think laughter is your drug of choice. I think that gratitude is a part of it, but there's also something more to your secret sauce, and perhaps it's that laughter. So how can we get more laughter in our day-to-day lives?
You could always go to the Laughter Yoga site and have a look at Madame Kataria, the Indian doctor who actually started the whole movement. He used to call it Laughter Club, now he calls it Laughter Yoga. But it's learning to laugh for no reason at all. And that's the joy of it. If you have an intellectual reason to laugh, like a joke, or someone's fallen over or something like that, or silly cats that fall off curtains and stuff like that, that doesn't last. But when you laugh for no reason at all, it frees your soul, and your soul takes wings, and you're free of judgment. You're free of all that stuff that buries us down. And we grow our own food. I don't drink fluoride. I think that's also a thing we need to get rid of, is fluoride. I don't watch television. I'm a bit of a Facebook junkie, but only for positive stuff. But yeah, it's what you think and what you do. But I do eat very well. We eat beautiful, clean food here, and I think that helps too.
Oh, definitely. I've seen a big shift in myself based upon getting some food out that wasn't real food and getting out some food that my body just doesn't agree with. Because a lot of it passes that blood-brain barrier, and so it impacts on on your thinking, on how you feel, on your responses to what's going on in the world around you.
And what we eat and what we drink. And I include, alkaline water that you can make with a bit of bicarb soda in it. But yeah, eating pure food, and I maintain too. Like, we wrote a book called A Year of Slow Food, which was growing our own food and eating each week is a recipe from the garden.
You're just full of surprises, Gerda. I'll have to put a link to that in the show notes as well. So before we wrap up, I would just love to hear if we've got children in our lives who are vulnerable, who are maybe in the foster care system, who have experienced trauma or who are currently, what can we do to try and prevent them from heading down the path of becoming someone that you work with in a maximum security jail?
Well, get them back into reality, I think, getting kids to, like, that self-directed play. I think that is just so, as you said earlier, is to get children to take more responsibility for their choices, and even if they get bored, let them get bored so that they'll have to pick up something and do something. But like, this life is a very manual life. You're in the garden, you're tending the chooks. I think we need to get back more into more. Kids need to do more manual things. Like digging up and growing their own food. Doing that sort of thing. Definitely being more tactile and away from electronica is definitely. And there are, like, I've got a school over the road from where I live, and thank God I hear them play for an hour every day. It's just a lot of fantastic sounds. So at least there, they still let the kids play for an hour a day, and plus recess as well. So, but yeah, they need to play.
Yeah. And I'm glad you touched on that, because I know I'm quite close to a very vulnerable part of Adelaide. It's a lower socioeconomic area, doesn't really have a great reputation. But what they've started to do is, in that area, is they've really scaled back playtime completely, because they're saying that there's so many issues, the kids can't get along, there's fighting, there's this, there's that, there's the other. So the play is being taken away. But all I can see now when I hear about that is, exactly, they need more play rather than less, especially if they've got some tricky things going on at home that they kind of need to play out to make sense of. And it's not going to be pretty however many years from now, because those children are the children who already have some risk factors going on. Then you add in that play deprivation, because a lot of them probably don't get a chance to play at home either. Yes. And then they're just going to be stuck in that cycle, repeating the poverty or repeating the crimes.
Well, the thing is that if there is to be a change, it has to be something like I worked with some out-of-control state wards. So these were state wards that were acting out and like selling themselves, there was one girl, she was 10, and she just bit everybody, and she was so violent. This was a sort of a mini prison. They were contained because they were a danger to themselves and others. And I was sent in there to do, they spent a whole lot of money for 6 months and did these wonderful things with them. They took them out and put them, to bushwalks. They did before and after photos. They taught them drama, cooking. I did relaxation and sewing and a whole lot of different and one-on-one conversations, because these kids were really, really, and that's something else I want to bring up before we go, is trust. Because, as you say, working in a jail environment there's no. People say, "Aren't you scared looking with all these violent people? They kill people, they rape people, and all that sort of thing." And yet, it's not about me trusting them. It's about them trusting me, because they have never had and sometimes some of us workers are the only people they have ever trusted in their whole lives. So there's that element of trust that play brings about too, because play, you have to trust a kid, don't you? You have to trust people a bit. You have to trust that people are going to do what they say they're going to do when you're in a play situation. So, yes, bring it on. Bring on play.
Yeah, that's huge, that trust part of the puzzle, definitely. And a lot of vulnerable children will say, it just took one teacher to believe in me and that changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I'm hoping that likewise with you, Gerda, if, it just takes that one person that works with them, that they truly can rehabilitate instead of reoffending.
Yes, and it was a simple little thing, like you can talk to them and do counselling and all that sort of thing. But I found that self-directed, lovely, like I do things like soul collage and a few other things that are just beautiful, and they're not getting anybody to be told what to think and do. They discover it for themselves.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for the conversation, Gerda. It has been lovely to get to know you more. I'm sure it'll be the first of many conversations that we have online, to be honest. And do you have anywhere that people can connect with you if they've, resonated with what you've said?
Well, yes, I've got a Facebook, Gerda Foster. I really appreciate what you're doing, Claire. I think it's wonderful, the support and all the interesting articles and all those lovely little areas of digression that you've got on your website and the work you're doing. I think it's wonderful. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thanks so much, Gerda. Right back at you. Ending with a laugh. That's pure perfection. Okay, so that is the end. So that is the end of episode 7. Oh, dear. This is staying in. I hope you know that. Hopefully it's given the listeners at least, an extra laugh in their day.
Oh, bless you. And bless everybody that's listening. Come on, you're beautiful people. Just be grateful and doors open when you're feeling the love,
So that is the end of episode number 71 of the Thriving Children podcast. Until next time, be kind to yourself and laugh a lot.
Thanks for listening to the Thriving Children podcast. For even more goodness, visit thrivingchildren.com.au.